Do you know the difference between temporal and eternal punishments? We need to understand these as Catholics, as our guide in our way to God. Welcome to Via Catholica channel, your Catholic way to God. If you are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to notify you of future premieres and uploads. Punishment. This is what we think whenever a person commits a mistake. In the Christian and Catholic concepts, punishment is given to a person who sins. This is usually given after the death of a person and the judgment of the Lord. In other words, these punishments are given after death. God will examine the life of a person, and then there's a particular judgment. Temporal punishment is given to the forgiven souls, while eternal punishment is given to the damned soul. To understand the difference between temporal and eternal punishment, one should understand the Catholic belief in sin and punishment. In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, sin is described as any transgression or evil deeds, any disobedience from the commandment of God which results in the separation from our relationship with God. In other words, sin cuts and disconnects our relationship with God. There are two kinds of sin: venial sins and mortal sins. Any actions which are not according to the will of God are sin. But some sins can kill the soul of man. They are sins that kill the spiritual life of man in such a way that it gradually separates man from the communion, grace, and love of God. We call this mortal sin. Since man cuts his relationship with God because of sin, man then will not enjoy the company of God. Sin has a double consequence. First, it deprives man of communion with God, and second, it deprives man to enjoy eternal life. This is what we call punishment. He who separates from the love of God is condemned eternally. The condemned soul will suffer the absence of God forever in what we call hell. This is what we call eternal punishment. But because of the love of God, through the suffering, death, and resurrection of Christ, which brought redemption to man, man is given a chance not to be condemned eternally. Jesus taught us the forgiveness of sins. And through the confession which the Church ministers, a person who asks for forgiveness, have a contrite heart, confess his sins, is forgiven. The soul of man is no longer condemned to eternal punishment. Catechism of the Catholic Church 1473 explains that the forgiveness of sin and restoration of communion with God entail the remission of the eternal punishment of sin, but temporal punishment remains. In other words, man has to undergo the state of purification before entering heaven. A forgiven soul has to cleanse himself before entering heaven. He has to undergo the state of purification and punishment for the forgiven sins he has committed. This is what we call temporal punishment. This state of purification of the soul after the death of man is what we teach in the Doctrine of Purgatory. The Doctrine of Purgatory is expressed in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Number 1031 states that all who die in God's grace and friendship but still imperfectly purified are indeed assured of their eternal salvation, but after death They undergo purification to achieve the holiness necessary to enter the joy heaven. In other words, temporal punishment assures the joy of heaven. All stains of sins that have been forgiven has to be purified in purgatory. However, God gives us a chance through the church to cleanse ourselves from temporal punishment while we are still living here on earth. It means we undergo temporal punishment while we are still living rather than after death. This is what we call indulgence. These are works of mercy and charity, prayers, and various practices of penance and sacrifices to aid every living Christian to purify himself from the stain of sins. In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 1471, an indulgence is a remission before God of the temporal punishment due to sins whose guilt has already been forgiven, which the faithful Christian who is duly disposed gains under certain prescribed conditions through the action of the Church, which, as the minister of redemption, dispenses and applies with authority the treasury of the satisfaction of Christ and the saints. For more details about indulgence, just click the card provided above or the link in the description box. Brothers and sisters, eternal punishment is a punishment for a condemned soul without hope of communion with God, while temporal punishment is a punishment for a forgiven soul as a process of purification before entering heaven. If you have learned something from this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell for future premieres and uploads. And don't hesitate to use the comment box for more questions, and if you have inquiries about our faith, just write it in the comment box for more future topics. Thank you very much, and see you for future videos.